I've never seen so much mail, trainloads of mail, that they could not get out because they didn't have anybody to do it.
We found bags of mail. A lot of them were rat infested. It was a mess. It was awful.
We did have 3 girls to get killed in our unit overseas.
I refused to accept any segregated facilities that they wanted to create for them. After that, they didn't try.
This video about the extraordinary women of the 688 Central Postal Battalion from World War II is made possible by the members of History X. The 6888th Central Postal Directory Battalion. Known simply as the 6888. The only all-black, all-female unit deployed overseas during World War II. During World War II, there was a significant shortage of soldiers who were able to manage the postal service for the U.S. Army overseas.
The greater part of our soldiers' day is mail call because they want to see what's going on at home.
Many letters and packages had only the first name of the intended recipient, or just a nickname.
Oftentimes people would just send mail to Johnny or Johnny Smith or whatever.
And by 1945, the U.S. Army faced a massive backlog of undelivered mail. Over 17 million pieces of undelivered mail. Army officials decided this undelivered mail was hurting morale. To tackle this, the 6888th Central Postal Directory Battalion was formed, comprising of 855 African American women from the Women's Army Corps, commonly referred to as WACs. Their mission? To sort and deliver the mail to over 7 million soldiers scattered across Europe.
You, Adams? Yes, sir. He said, what do you want to do? I don't know, sir. He said, I don't know what I'm going to do with you young women. You're too young to be in the Army in the first place. That was on Saturday. And Monday morning, I was made a company commander. There were even women who came from families where there were no sons. And they joined the service to represent their family in the war effort. And the first group of the black women, only 2 people got a uniform the first day we went for uniforms. Either the waistline was too small, the skirts were too short, the sleeves were always too short. But we got pieces of uniform. Everybody got a hat and a purse. And so that we were authorized to use all the pieces we had and just keep on adding to it as we got the other pieces. At the end of about 3 weeks, when the last shoe order came in, we finally got everybody uniform. And we loved them. They were afraid that if they sent black wax overseas, we would cause a problem. I never have found out what they meant by that. But eventually there was sufficient pressure from the press that they finally decided to go overseas. And that's when I had been given orders to go overseas. Although I didn't know what the job was and I didn't know where I was going when I left the stage, I knew that given the same opportunity and training, I'm sure I can do as well as anybody else.
Charity Adams called me at home Christmas of 1940. She says, well, I would like for you to be my battalion executive officer, and asked me if I wanted to go overseas. I said yes.
Captain Noel, Campbell, and I were sent over a couple of weeks ahead of the troops to get things ready. We thought we were going to Paris, and we opened our sealed orders 1 hour after we were in flight and found that we were going to London. We found out that we were going to be in the Postal Directory Service.
That was in January 1945. And that's when the 688 Central Postal Directory started. And there were 800 women and 23 officers. And Charity Adams and I were sent to England to get a place for those 800 women to live.
There were white wax in lots of places on the UK, and they all used the same WAC recreational hotel in London. And this is where the real problem came in. The Red Cross wanted to set up another hotel for the black wags, and I promised them that it would be over my dead body before anybody slept there, and nobody slept there to my knowledge. I refused to accept any segregated facilities that they wanted to create for them. After that, they didn't try.
We ended up in Birmingham, England, which was a short distance from London. There we were given a dilapidated school that had not been used in I don't know how many years during the war. It told us that's where 800 women and 23 officers were going to live and work.
But it was a big cold stone building. And of course, with our ingenuity, we always try to make everything comfortable.
Noel and I had decided what we would be doing here in an office space and so forth. Then we set out getting the place ready for our troops to come.
In 4 weeks' time, we got the building ready for living quarters and for the work area.
We call it the 688.
On February 15th, 1945, the 6888 arrived in Birmingham, England. This footage shows the battalion marching in review before Lieutenant General John C.H. Lee, whose responsibilities included the mail.
Just before the troops arrived in England, General John C.H. Lee, who was commanding general of the communications zone, invited Noel and me to dinner. And dinner was in our honor, and it was very nice and very swank at the Georges V Hotel. And in the midst of the dinner, General Lee said, "Adams, can your troops march?" And there is only one answer when a general asks you a question. The answer is, you have never seen better marching troops in your life. And he said, "When do they arrive?" And I said, "They arrive on the 13th. And he said, "I'll be down on the 15th to see them march."
Adams said that she knew that her girls could march and could have a parade, and he asked us, would we be ready? So after we got there, we had to have a parade.
Well, the troops had come over on the Ile-de-France, and it had taken 11 days, and they'd been chased by submarines for several days.
We were about 3/4 way over. The captain discovered a German submarine. So we had to turn and come back toward the United States, make a turn to the east, travel for several miles, and then head back to England.
And being unaccustomed to shipboard facilities, it was a rather sad-looking lot that got off.
When we got to England, we were told that we were going to parade.
And of course the girls had not marched, they hadn't drilled, but we did it.
All the women had to dress up in their best and join the parade.
We were ready for them, and we marched for General Lee. And he was so pleased, he wrote my father a letter and told him I was a fine young woman. And so I was very pleased.
But I didn't get to parade because I had mumps.
To see the unedited footage of the extraordinary women who served in the 6th 888 Central Postal Battalion during World War II, which was recovered from the National Archives and used in this video, consider becoming a History X member, where you can access other original, unedited History X interviews and videos. The 6th 888 encountered terrible conditions. Cold, unheated warehouses stacked floor to ceiling with undelivered mail.
We were sent to England to redirect mail to every serviceman in the ETO.
And when we arrived, the Battle of the Bulge, which was between December the 15th, 44 and January 15th, 45, had created an enormous backlog of mail. Even all the mail which had gone to the continent for American GIs had been moved back to England because the fighting was so severe. And at that point, they didn't know which way the fighting was going to go. So our first job was to deliver the Christmas packages and the Christmas mail that had piled up from Christmas 1944.
We found bags of mail. A lot of them were rat infested, where people send food, pies, and cakes. They were all vermin infested. It was a mess. It was awful. I mean, you looked around and you said, "Oh my God, what is this?" But then you knew you had to get to work and start doing something. So we used an old airplane hangar and we built a post office out of it. We had 3 shifts, 7 days a week.
I've never seen so much mail. It was such a backlog of mail. Warehouses all over England and France, trainloads of mail that they could not get out because they didn't have anybody to do it.
We mostly existed on sea rations. It was difficult. It wasn't an easy thing. And it was cold, nothing heated, But we were young, we were strong, and we survived, and we were committed.
We were a self-supporting unit, and we had women who did everything. Our own mess hall, our own supply, own military police. We had our own transportation. With 800 women, we had all kinds of things. We opened up a beauty parlor. We had beauticians. As I said, anything that we needed, we found in our women. With 800 women, you got all kinds of occupations. They gave us fatigues and overcoats and boots and pants and liners, anything that was warm, because back then we wore skirts, no pants at all. That's the first time in the Army that we wore pants, because you almost had to sleep in them because the buildings were so cold. And that's where I first learned to make a fire in my life, because we had no heaters. We had to heat by fireplaces all over the place. We did have 3 girls to get killed in our unit overseas. With 800 women, you got all kinds of occupations. Then we found out that some of them had worked in funeral parlors. And of course, they fixed up the girls beautifully.
Working in shifts around the clock, they developed an innovative tracking system to process approximately 65,000 pieces of mail per shift. This included creating and maintaining a card index, which ultimately contains 7 million cards of servicemen with the same or similar names, using their military serial numbers to distinguish them.
Well, we had a system, and of course we worked with intelligence to keep knowing where the soldiers were going, because they were moving around. And, it was very, very organized.
Our job was to sit with a box in front of you. That's all the women did for 8 hours every day. And they had cards, and they would find where these men were and send it to all of the servicemen in Europe.
Oftentimes people would just send mail to Johnny or, somebody who, there's Johnny, but where's the, so we'd have to have a group set aside that would go through the mail and find out what the family name was. So they would know it was Johnny Smith or whatever and put it together.
I never saw so many Smiths and Jones. There's so many people with the same name. And the only way we could find out where to send the mail was by the difference in their serial numbers. That is one reason why they told you to put your serial number behind your name.
We had a lot of ingenuity to get it working, get it done.
We had approximately 800 enlisted women in offices. We worked 3 shifts, 8 hours a day, and we did get a commendation for delivering that mail at top speed.
They asked us if we could get it rolling in 6 months or something. We were able to get it rolling in 3 months, caught up in 3 months.
The women of the 6888 faced racism and sexism both within the military and abroad.
The American troops received us in lots of ways. There were no white wax near us in Birmingham. The white GIs told tales about us. The Red Cross wanted to segregate us, and the British just wanted to visit us. The citizens received us quite in hand, but with a lot of curiosity.
They had never seen any black people before. We were invited to churches, we were invited everywhere to speak. We had parades, and so they were just lovely to us.
In Birmingham, England, the people were just incredible. We made lots of friends. That's where I got my first fish and chips.
We all kept in touch with those people who were close to us. But they began to have reunions, and I went to my first reunion in 1988. And even though I tell them, please call me by my first name, I can't do that. Amazingly, many people have great difficulty believing that black troops, whether women or men, were very patriotic, and they were there to win the war. And when the war was over, they had done their duty and they wanted to go back home. You don't really think history till after you do it.
For another inspiring story about perseverance during war, check out this video.